Something extraordinary happened on the 24th of June in the year 2016 after one young lawyer invaded the offices of the Orange Democratic Movement (ODM) and announced that he had taken over.
From today, I, Edwin Sifuna, is the Secretary General of the party, Orange Democratic Movement.
That lawyer was Edwin Sifuna, the Nairobi City Senator who has made unimaginable sacrifices to get where he is now, and whom many Kenyans are starting to think would make a great president for them.
If you are scared, go to church.
This epic video is about to dig deep into the possibility
My name is Edwin Sifuna.
that instead of defending the senatorial seat in Nairobi, Senator Edwin Sifuna of Linda Mwananchi could be in talks with both Kalonzo Musyoka and William Ruto.
We don't look for jobs to pay taxes, Khalwale.
But also the idea that the ODM party is still sending emissaries at night to beg Sifuna to be their presidential candidate in the 2027 elections.
Everything I say, everything, there is a clip. It's on video. It's like these things I've said here today. I cannot deny them.
In order to fully understand just how famous Sifuna is among Kenyan voters, it is important to follow the story of his humble beginnings.
Kenyans on Twitter came out overwhelmingly and said, you have to balance this interview. Why don't you invite Edwin Sifuna, the coup leader? So I thought about it, and in the end, I relented, and I did. I sent out a new poster showing Ababu Namwamba and Edwin Sifuna. Would you know what happened next?
His secret relationship with the late Raila Odinga,
News, tunaona na baba jioni.
and how billionaire Jimmy Wanjiru almost cost Sifuna his political career with a fake promise. Edwin Sifuna would appear to Kenyans on TV and newspapers for the first time when he declared himself as the new ODM Secretary General, ousting the then SG Ababu Namwamba in those dramatic scenes of June 2016. The political beef between Senator Sifuna and Ababu Namwamba had begun due to Ababu Namwamba's perceived betrayal, because Ababu, being a lawyer just like Sifuna, had been accused of going to bed with William Ruto, one of the main political opponents of the ODM party back then, in spite of Ababu's position as the party Secretary General.
I'm a pure lawyer. You know, there are doubts as to your purity. But I'm saying, I can show you
What
where
does that even mean?
No, there's a story in the political realm. I can show you where my grandfather's grave is in Kitinda, in Bungoma. What I am telling you is that pure lawyers like myself, we follow strength, we follow conviction, we follow leadership. We're not going to follow you just because we were born with you. We are born with even thieves and people who have of no moral character. You don't follow them because you're born with them.
Edwin Watenya Sifuna is a Bukusu politician born on the 22nd of May 1982. Senator Sifuna was born in a Kakamega hospital and brought up in the village of Kitinda, Bungoma County, and then later his parents would relocate from the village to Kakamega when Edwin was still a little boy.
Who are those people who are telling us those things? These kind of youth wingers here who are in power now. From that time. So examine the history of everyone.
Sifuna had an uncle who was a famous Moi-era politician, but even before the time when he goes to live with his famous politician uncle, he had already encountered his first major political event, which would happen as follows. It would go down that Sifuna was out and about with his mother, having been a mama's boy himself, in the time when they had moved to Kakamega town where his father was employed. This was the period of the 1992 election campaigns, and Sifuna's mother would go with him to the ruling Kano party offices in Kakamega, where many local people, especially women, would go to collect money from Cyrus Jirongo's people who were openly bribing voters to vote for Moi and Kano in that upcoming elections. When they got there, Sifuna's mother was given a 500 shillings note, a larger than normal, brand new banknote that was still a rare denomination amongst Kenyans, especially rural Kenyans, because the Central Bank of Kenya had just released that note into the economy. Similar to many other places in the country at the time, many Kenyans were tired of Kano leadership in Sifuna's backyard of Kakamega, and therefore a nasty rumor started circulating telling residents that Cyrus Jirongo's 500 shillings notes had certain satanic powers and that the money had come from the devil himself. In fear of bringing Jirongo's demonic money to their home, young Sifuna and his dear mother would decide to do with the money as every other lawyer in Kakamega was doing at the time, because they had heard those stories. They went into the nearest supermarket, specifically Mama Watoto supermarket, which was still popular in the western town back then, and converted that demonic Kanu money into groceries, aka unga na mafuta, before Cyrus Jirongo's demonic connections could know they had the money.
Why did they attach your name personally, your name to the 500 shilling note?
Thank God I'm alive. I can still talk.
Yes.
I even was under attack, if you remember, the time they opened the fire on me in Westlands.
Yes.
They really tried hard to look for a scapegoat. That scapegoat was meant to be YK92, a team that Jirongo led. They tried and tried and tried, including elimination, so that they can find where to put the blame. All through, we have gone through cases of Goldenberg. I don't appear. But you'll find names there that were handling all that money. Even if we have what power, assuming the money was being printed and given to Jirongo, Jirongo would not have distributed that money.
As a boy growing up in Kakamega, Edwin Sifuna would begin to attend public rallies by famous opposition politicians such as Martin Shikuku and Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, who was even running for the presidency in the 1992 general elections.
Jaramogi. Nilimuona once. Alikufa 94. Alikufa 94. 94 nilikuwa how many years? 12.
In Sifuna's life, even police tear gas was something he would encounter while still a boy in the streets of Kakamega.
Hizi sura zote nazijua. Hapa hata wanitaki mheshimiwa ama Sifuna, hapana, wananitaka Edu.
On the first day that he had tear gas in his eyes as a small boy, it happened that Sifuna and other boys in his play group had made it a habit of using illegal means to watch football matches at the Bukungu Stadium in their own town without ever buying a single ticket. They had made a small opening in the walls of the Bukungu Stadium perimeter, back then known as Panya routes, through which they would fit their slender 30-kilo bodies and enter the stadium from behind any time. Sifuna's group of notorious boys had perfected the art of stadium infiltration until one day something happened that would usher them into the cloudy world of tear gas canisters and police. A major football match was to be played there in the Bukungu Stadium between what was then Kakamega's biggest football club, then known as Modcom FC, playing against Bandari FC from the coastal city of Mombasa. It's inside the Bukungu Stadium on this match day that young Edwin Sifuna would find himself in a major dilemma. As you might have already guessed, Sifuna and his band of mischievous boys were not planning to buy any tickets for that particular match either, but sure as the sun would shine, they were planning to watch that football game from inside the stadium. As the referee started the game between Modcom and Bandari FC that afternoon, Sifuna's own team were already seated in Bukungu Stadium, having gotten in an hour earlier through their usual Panya routes. The football match would go on to almost completion, with Sifuna's home team of Modcom FC showing every sign of winning that day. However, towards the end of the game, the away team Bandari was awarded a penalty kick. The many football fanatics in the stadium, such as Sifuna, were not willing to watch this penalty kick out, fearing that their team was going to lose, and there they would start running into the pitch to stop the match. In the chaos that followed, the Modcom FC supporters were throwing stones at the Bandari FC players and the buses they had traveled in, and Sifuna narrates how minutes later, the whole place was teeming with anti-riot police who had come in swiftly to deal with the rioting football fans. This would be Edwin Sifuna's first time to get a taste of the police tear gas in his own eyes. While narrating the events of that day on a popular city podcast many years later, Sifuna accepts that indeed he had also thrown stones at Bandari FC vehicles along with everyone else who was against the penalty kick. Edwin's uncle, known as Lawrence Sifuna, was a long-time member of parliament who had been elected in two different constituencies, first in Bungoma South constituency and then in Bumula constituency. Just like his nephew Edwin, the late Honorable Lawrence Sifuna was a well-known politician not just in Western Kenya but across the country, especially because of his prominent position within the famous political clique known as the Seven Bearded Sisters, which was a group of opposition politicians, none of them a sister, that was giving President Daniel Moi sleepless nights during the Kanu era. Senator Edwin Sifuna later on testified that he remembers his uncle Lawrence as having had the greatest and earliest political influence on his young life.
I want to say a special thank you to the nuclear family of Uncle Lawrence, to my mothers, all the three of you, to my brothers and my sisters, thank you for sharing this wonderful man with us.
When Edwin Sifuna left the village of Kitinda in Bungoma as a boy to go stay in Kakamega, he would get a chance to live in the house of his uncle Lawrence for a whole year while he was briefly attending Lions Primary School in Kakamega town. Sifuna also narrates how his famous politician uncle would teach him to dress well and wear fragrant perfumes, especially when stepping out in public, and also influenced his later love for attending parties and going out to social events over the weekends. Later on, when he would join the University of Nairobi, Edwin Sifuna would routinely visit his uncle Lawrence, who was by then a retired member of parliament living in Nairobi West. And his luxurious life even then would continue to inspire the young man Edwin and his brothers. In one particular incident from this period in his life, Edwin Sifuna would visit Uncle Lawrence in the company of another one of his cousins from the wider Sifuna family, and they would receive one unforgettable cooking lesson from the MP before he drove them to watch a football match at the Nyayo Stadium that day. Edwin remembers that Lawrence Sifuna would boil some beef for a long period of time on his cooker, all while making his two impatient nephews to sit and wait for the meat to cook, even giving them some soup from the broth of the meat to sip as they waited. When Edwin and his cousin couldn't wait any longer, they would loudly complain to him that he was boiling that beef for too long, and Lawrence would calmly explain to them about the importance of cooking beef well enough to make it soft and tender for eating. When the food was eventually ready, the beef would indeed turn out to be as tender and as delicious as he had said it would be. Then Lawrence took the boys to Nyayo to watch the football match. Edwin Sifuna remembers asking his uncle how they would enter the stadium without any tickets, but he was shocked to see that once they arrived, his uncle was ushered into the stadium not like a kawaida mwananchi, but like a very important person, with the ticket officers and security at the Nyayo gates even saluting his car. The Honorable Lawrence Sifuna would live a relatively long life, and he died in December 2023 and was buried in his home in Western Kenya. Observing his extraordinary rise to the top of city politics in Kenya, one would not easily guess that Edwin Sifuna was born in Bungoma in the village far away from the capital city Nairobi, and even his earliest educational experiences started at Kitinda Primary School in Bungoma before transferring to Kakamega Township Primary School in another western county of Kakamega, the school where he would sit for his Kenya Certificate of Primary Education KCPE. Sifuna's father was known as Vincent Watenya, who worked as a public servant at the Kakamega Municipal Council, and Sifuna's mother was a retired school teacher who taught for a very long time at the Moi Primary School in Bungoma.
Baba yangu Mheshimiwa Watenya amewaambia kwamba wakati ambapo nilikuwa naenda university mwaka 2001, hii familia ya Sifuna, kuna watu wanadanganyanga huko nje ati sisi tulikuwa madynasty. Tumetoka mbali sana, tumekuwa katika hali ya umaskini, hali ngumu sana. Wakati ambapo naenda university hatukuwa na pesa. Huyu mzee Watenya akapanga harambee, tulikuwa tunaishi mahali hapa inaitwa Makaburini. Watu wa Bungoma mnajua Makaburini, si ndio?
Edwin Sifuna was born alongside 4 siblings, 2 brothers and 2 sisters. Sifuna was very sharp in class, and once he was done with his primary education in Kakamega, he was invited to join the Musingo High School in the same county for secondary education. In a comprehensive interview he did with the Star newspaper, the famous city senator would reflect on how his leadership qualities would start to emerge during his time at Musingo High School. As an ultra-social and charismatic teenager, Edwin Watenya Sifuna was the school's major cheerleader and ambassador for the Musingo rugby team, and although he would never play the game himself, Sifuna was known to accompany the rugby team to all the tournaments that they attended outside the school. Not just that, whenever other students in the school wanted to be on the list of those going out alongside the school rugby team, they had to go through Edwin Sifuna and offer him gifts and bribes to allow them on the list of those going out. Even later, after joining the University of Nairobi, Sifuna's love for a good cheer would go on with him, and he was among the thousands of young city-dwelling Kenyans gathered at the Uhuru Park in 2003 to celebrate the newly elected Mwai Kibaki government, which had won the presidential elections against Moi's candidates in December 2002. After sitting for his final KCSE exams at Musingo High School, Sifuna's dream would come true after he was invited to study law at the University of Nairobi starting the year 2001.
In fact, in third year of university, when he was in fourth year, we are the class that defeated him at a very hotly contested election for the Kenya Law Student Society president. I think that is what it was called then.
That actually, it is not that you defeated me in that contest. It is to the contrary. I was the outgoing chair of KLSS, and Mr. James Mamboleo, who was my candidate, who was in your class. So we defeated the Okonjos, who were in the fourth year.
The Senator Murkomen had a project, and we defeated the project. That was Okonjo.
Edwin Sifuna has openly admitted that he loved going to parties and discos in the early 2000s as a young university student, narrating how he and his friends frequently visited popular city nightclubs such as K1, Honbeo, which was located on Tomboya Street, and other times when they were short on cash, he and his other party-loving classmates would just walk from their hostels in the city campus to Buzz Bar, another entertainment joint that was located in Westlands.
What is the first thing you do when you wake up?
I put on my music. I wake up with music.
As a student at the university, Edwin Sifuna would even try his hand in business, and the first thing he tried to sell was millet, the type of African cereal found in parts of Western Kenya and neighboring Uganda. Sifuna was, however, importing his millet not from home but from Uganda as contraband through the porous Kenya-Uganda border, although still his enterprise would end up collapsing. Then he would move on to selling socks and other second-hand clothes in his Bungoma hometown during the long holidays, and when that did not work out either, he resorted in helping his mother to sell onions, fruits and vegetables at a small grocery store in Bungoma.
Kama time ya kuapisha baba. Unajua madangu yeye kwa mtu roho rahisi sana. Lakini anajua hizi niambia kitu. Madhezi niambia ati wewe acha hii. Unajua she lives in fear ya kwamba these people will kill me.
Anything could happen.
Sema wewe vile unaongelesha watu bwana unawapeleka mbio sana hata hii TV siwache kwenda nini. Ambia mama hii ndio kazi yangu lazima nifanye na wewe ishi na uoga. So chenye anafanyanga alifikiria leza pigia wife. So siku ya kuapisha baba akapigia wife akamwambia wewe msichana unajua wewe ndio utabaki mjane.
Edwin Sifuna graduated with a bachelor's degree in law in the year 2006, and he was 1 year late because originally he was supposed to have graduated in the previous year of 2005. After graduating law school, Sifuna was ready to embark on making good his training as a lawyer in the city when the government of Kenya suddenly announced new changes and requirements for all lawyers and law graduates in the country. Starting the year 2006, every student who had graduated with law degrees in Kenya would be expected to undergo further training at the Kenya School of Law for 1 full year in order to get his license to practice in the courts. Angry and disappointed, Edwin Sifuna was among the hundreds of students who attended a major protest in the city to oppose those new regulations, but ultimately they would all be forced to obey the directives and return to class at the Kenya School of Law. Having stretched themselves out to educate him through the expensive law degree program at the University of Nairobi, Sifuna's parents back home in Western would find it hard to raise more money to pay for his additional education, although it didn't stop them from encouraging him to go to the Kenya School of Law.
I went home in December to see my mom, and we have brothers, we have sisters, we have cousins who graduated as teachers 8 years ago.
Back when he had been admitted, Sifuna had also taken out a loan from the Higher Educational Loans Board (HELB) to assist his parents pay for his law school education, but that loan was not offered in paying for his postgraduate program at the Kenya School of Law, forcing him to become enterprising again and start another business to complement what his parents were paying in order for him to go through the School of Law and sit for his bar examinations. Lawyer Edwin Sifuna would graduate from the Kenya School of Law after 2 years and then go straight into pre-employment training in an actual law firm in Nairobi. That was the year 2007 when he started his pupillage, the term used for law internship programs at the Cairo and Makot Advocates Law Firm in Nairobi.
2008 sasa hiyo tukifanya hiyo mambo ya post-election violence.
Yes.
Sasa hiyo ndio ilifaa kuwa Kenya School of Law.
Okay.
So una qualify from Kenya School of Law kama wakili, lakini because of the political situation in the country hakukuwa na job. Nilihustle in Nairobi.
After his pupillage, Sifuna had met all requirements to be admitted as an advocate of the High Court of Kenya in the year 2008. Even though he had stayed in school for 6 years learning the law, Edwin Sifuna did not find employment easily after he got his law license in 2008, and his very first job would come months after becoming a lawyer.
So in Nairobi,
for 19 months natafuta job, sinanga job. Nilikuwa naishi kwa bedsitter South B. But nilikuwa na landlord mwingine mpoa sana. Alikuwa yeye ananiambia daily hata usipolipa rent, niko na rent arrears ya miezi 6 na nilikuwa ngatu 500. Ananiambia yeye ananiombea tu. Unaona? So in the 6th month ya hiyo arrears nikapata job yangu ya first. Nilikuwa nafanya job kama wakili kwa kampuni ya mkate. Wanajiita Superloaf.
Yes.
Huko Kangundo Road. Yeah, nilikuwa na 40,000 but hiyo time hiyo do ilikuwa mob. Nilipoa hiyo 40k hivi nikachukua hiyo do kwanza nikapelekea huyo mother. Nikamlipa kwanza 30,000 ya miezi 6. Nikamwambia asante kunivumilia. Unaona?
Wapi kama so have you ever met her?
Sijawahi meet by the way.
Okay.
Nilijaribu kurudi hiyo maeneo nilikuwa na stay lakini sikumpata hiyo day.
Yes.
Yeah, but wherever she is I can't remember her name in all honesty. Yes. Lakini wherever she is, mi usema mama Mungu ambariki tu. Kwa sababu alinisitiri akanifunika aibu. Unajua hakuna kitu mbaya Nairobi kama kutupwa nje.
Yes.
So after that
Sifuna would get his first job as a lawyer at a bread making company where he was employed as a legal officer with a monthly salary of 40,000 shillings. Eventually, Edwin Sifuna got a better job with a much better pay and his life started to change after getting that job. He would get employed by Magnet Ventures, an advertising company associated with billboard advertising, and his new job would start him off at a salary of 150,000 shillings, more than 3 times what he had been making at the bread making company, and by the year 2013, Sifuna's salary had been raised to 400,000 shillings every month. This job would drastically improve Edwin Sifuna's living standards, allowing him to even move into a bigger 3-bedroom house in the city. It was here that Sifuna got a rare opportunity to meet former Prime Minister Raila Odinga with the connection of his lawyer friend known as Silas Jakakimba. Silas Jakakimba had been Sifuna's classmate from their law school days in Nairobi, and he had been lucky to get a job as one of Raila Odinga's lawyers immediately after graduating from the Kenya School of Law. This was a period of rapid financial success for young Edwin Sifuna, who had also just begun planning for marriage to his long-term girlfriend that he had been dating since 2010. Edwin Sifuna and his partner would not get legally married until later, the year 2015, when he was finally getting ready to get into elective politics.
Wife yangu ni wakili.
Both of you are lawyers.
Kama husband and wife ama kama counsel.
And she's way smarter than me anyway. Me, I don't even argue. Mnakubali tu. Ila unasema sawa.
Happy wife, happy life.
Yeah. Yeye ni wakili, amesoma kunishinda, ako na masters, mimi namwangalianga tu. Ni mwandishi. She's an environmental lawyer. Kwanza alikuwa prosecutor.
Before his encounter with Raila Odinga, Sifuna had already been getting himself into activities of the Orange Democratic Movement, and he was already making friends among notable members of the party within the Nairobi legal circles. When Raila Odinga lost the presidential elections in March 2013, Edwin Sifuna would dramatically quit his job as a lawyer for the advertising company that following April.
Elections ilikuwa cold. Wakasema tumelose. Boss, people were calling me from all over the world crying. Mimi mwenyewe nilikuwa depressed 3 months.
What?
I'm telling you. Mimi hata sikuwa najua ati Wabukusu wanaweza pata depression.
In a candid interview aired by TV47 in September 2023, Senator Edwin Sifuna would admit that the main reason for quitting his well-paying job at Magnet Ventures Limited was work-related pressure.
Nikajiuliza lakini manze hii stress yote ni ya nini? Kwa sababu mdosi yani daily. For my mental health nikasema mimi wacha niende sasa nianze kupractice alone kama wakili.
He narrated how, despite the very attractive salary he was making there, his responsibilities at the company had become too much for him, and the work-related stress did not allow him time for himself and his young family. On top of that, Sifuna's work schedule had been limiting his ability to get active in ODM politics, in which he had now become a key player. He would narrate how on the same day that he resigned from the company, he would even turn off his phone to sleep at night for the very first time, because his former bosses had made it a habit of calling him at night over work-related emergencies every day. In a separate interview, Sifuna admits that Raila Odinga's 2013 campaign loss came as a slap in the face for him, and that the mental weight of that disappointment could also have contributed to his decision to resign from his job at Magnet Ventures. Perhaps you have heard the popular saying, especially among opposition politicians in Nairobi, that if you had ever wanted to see Raila Odinga face to face when he was alive, the best and easiest time would have been just after he had lost an election. Sifuna had quoted that same phrase when narrating the story about his own time meeting Raila Odinga face to face. After his law school friend Kakamega had made all necessary arrangements to get Sifuna involved with the ODM party youth affairs, the day would eventually come for him to go meet Raila Odinga at Baba's Upper Hill office. That day, Sifuna would wake up very early and prepare to go meet his idol, the former Prime Minister, who was a big inspiration for young lawyers and leaders from Western Kenya and Nyanza back then. When he showed up, Sifuna came ready with ideas he was planning to share with the former Prime Minister about how to improve the ODM party. On his arrival at the Upper Hill office, Sifuna did not expect to have such easy access to Raila Odinga, who had been sitting sipping chai behind his desk. Raila Odinga had not heard of the young man before, but once he introduced himself by his name, Mzee would get curious about whether he had relations with the late Bumula MP Lawrence Sifuna, having said his parents came from Bungoma. Raila Odinga would then ask his people to bring an additional cup for young Sifuna to share in his tea, all while asking the young man about his uncle Lawrence and the rest of the family back at home, since Raila had been friends with Edwin's uncle Lawrence for a long time. That day, Sifuna would speak to Raila Odinga at length about his ideas that he had about how to revamp the ODM party, especially now that they had lost the elections and the court petition to their Jubilee party competitors.
The first time I met him actually was while he was still Prime Minister. That Silas Kakamega used to work in his office, and we were in the same class in campus. So when we were going into the 2012 election, he said, as lawyers, we can sit together and do something for Mzee. We wanted to support the campaign. We were young people. There, Kipchumba, Murkomen were in that room that day when we met Baba. So it was first arranged by Kakamega, who was my classmate. We met at the Prime Minister's office. We talked about, there was those conversations that time about the new constitution. They needed to explain to Kenyans what devolution is going to look like and so on and so forth. I can't quite remember whether it was 2009 or 2010.
His first meeting with Raila Odinga in Upper Hill would shape the young lawyer's political future inside the Orange Democratic Movement Party for many years to come. After he had resigned from his high-paying job at the advertising company, Sifuna went on to register his own law offices in Nairobi, and here his monthly income would be just a fraction of what he had been making as a paid employee of Magnet Ventures Limited. He would later admit to falling into hard financial times in this period, where he would struggle to raise just 50,000 shillings every month to pay rent and fuel his car. His fledgling law practice only attracted small fish clients, mostly individual land buyers and other Kenyans seeking one-time services of a licensed lawyer in the city. Luckily for him at the time, Sifuna had landed an opportunity to write a weekly column on the Star newspaper, and a bit later, through the connections of another friend who was working at the office of the Registrar of Political Parties, Gladys Shelley, he landed another job writing another column on the much bigger Standard newspaper. From writing for the Star newspaper at almost no pay, the connection at Shelley's office got Sifuna a weekly column on the Standard, since Gladys Shelley's husband was a senior executive there, and Sifuna started making 60,000 shillings every month as compensation for his weekly submissions to the Standard. One day in his weekly newspaper column for the Standard newspaper, Edwin Sifuna decided to sharply criticize the leadership of his own ODM party. The article would be read by many people across Kenya, and among those who saw it would be Professor Anyang' Nyong'o, a top official in the party back then, who after reading the well-written critique would then invite Sifuna to sit with him and discuss in a private meeting.
2015, yes. Because of the fiasco with the party primaries in Homa Bay, those primaries, I had gotten a gig. I used to write for the Standard newspaper every Sunday.
Yes, I remember.
So I wrote a very scathing article just telling the party that this is not how to manage primaries, and you're demoralizing members. At that particular point in time, Anyang' Nyong'o is the Secretary General of ODM.
Contrary to what you'd expect, Professor Nyong'o told Sifuna that young people of his caliber were needed in the ODM party, and without hesitation, the high-ranking ODM professor would recruit Sifuna into a special ODM think tank that he said was a special committee formed to recalibrate Raila Odinga's politics moving forward now that he had lost his 2013 presidential bid.
I was made part of the think tank.
Most of the other people drafted into that special ODM think tank were senior to Sifuna both in age and experience. These were people like John Githongo, who had been Kibaki's former anti-corruption boss, the famous Kenyan economic academic Dr. David Ndii, the Professor Adam Zolo, and Professor Anyang' Nyong'o himself. The very first meeting of this top-heavy ODM think tank took place at Raila Odinga's residence in Nairobi, and this would be Edwin Sifuna's first time visiting that place. When the other members shared their views in the meeting for the first time, Sifuna was intimidated by their status and seniority, later saying that it took a long time before he could get the guts to share his own views in those meetings. Today, Edwin Sifuna says these men turned out to be great mentors and teachers in his early years at Chungwa House. Sadly, many doors had started to open for the young lawyer because in that same year of 2013, Sifuna was invited for his very first television debate on KTN. How that debut interview came to happen for him is another interesting story. It so happened that most senior leaders of the party had gone away to attend a political function in Mombasa, and since the TV producers at KTN had programmed a debate that needed one ODM spokesperson, the National Director of Communications for the party, a man known as Dennis Onyango, recommended the young lawyer Edwin Sifuna to go appear in that debate for the party. That is how a nervous Edwin Sifuna appeared on daytime television for the first time, all while fighting the anxiety of being interviewed by the famous newscaster Yvonne Okwara. Sifuna did well representing Raila and the ODM party in that TV debate, and moving forward he was sent more often to appear in media interviews as a voice of the party. Over the years, Edwin Sifuna went on to cement his place as the undisputed master of political television debates in Kenya's morning television industry.
You know how jobs are created, Ndu. The government by itself cannot employ all of us.
No.
Yes. You need the private sector to have confidence in your country to be able to put money here.
It is only dictators who believe they know what is best for everyone. That somehow, because they were elected, they are this genius who know where the country is supposed to be, what you're supposed to eat, who you're supposed to love, how many children you're supposed to have.
Surpassing former champions William Ruto, Meguna, and even Dr. Boni Halwale.
I decided to donate my time to you because you have what we call warped logic. What you're trying to explain, it doesn't make any sense. And Kagusha, I wish you were sweating like this on the floor of the house to defend the positions you took. For instance, to explain to Kenyans why you think the people of Mukurweini deserve to pay housing levy.
All the publicity from writing weekly newspaper columns on major newspapers, frequently swimming with the ODM sharks in a top think tank committee, as well as the daily TV interviews he kept being invited to, would all work together to skyrocket Sifuna's profile as a lawyer across Nairobi. He was now even getting involved in the politics of the Law Society of Kenya, LSK. In 2015, Edwin Sifuna felt that he had made enough impressions to run for his uncle's old MP seat back in Bungoma.
First time I ran, I see a lot of people saying I ran how many times. No. The first time I ran for office is 2017.
Sifuna decided he would vie for the Kandui parliamentary seat on an ODM ticket come the 2017 general elections. He began by traveling to Bungoma more and more often to introduce himself to the local leaders, even as Raila Odinga's own presidential campaign for 2017 had started to gather momentum. Different from how it had been when he had gone to see Raila Odinga at his Upper Hill office in 2013.
Raila Odinga has a very famous office at Capitol Hill in Nairobi. If you go into that office, there's a quotation from Martin Luther King that hangs on his wall.
Sifuna's name could not help him in the campaign trail back in Bungoma, and he would face a difficult time trying to market himself as the incoming member of parliament in the villages of Kandui. Having no popularity of his own at the time, Sifuna was often forced to pay bribes to the people in charge of funeral services and the MCs to allow him to address the mourners and announce his bid. When he finally dared to announce that he was running for the Kandui parliamentary seat in 2017, the community elders in that area sat him down in a confidential meeting and decided to give the boy the facts of life. The lawyer leaders told Sifuna that to even consider representing them in Nairobi, he needed to have three important things, which are a house in the village, a wife he had married legally, and most importantly, money. Sifuna was determined, and first he would build a 3-bedroom bungalow in his father's compound in Bungoma. After that, the lawyer went on to pay dowry in Matungu for his wife who he had been living with since the year 2010.
Wife yangu anatoka Matungu.
Okay.
One wife.
Edwin Sifuna's wife works in wildlife conservation here in Kenya, and they have one daughter together who Sifuna likes to talk about at the slightest provocation.
Mtoi wangu ako 6 years old. Huyu ukimwangalia vibaya anaanza kulia. Sasa utamzushia aje? So hizi
Kutana na hizi clips ama ameona ama
yeye ukutana nazo, anaendanga shule, anarudi home ananiuliza ati dad, is it true you are wearing a sufuria on your head? I'm sure it's true.
The third thing that the village elders had requested that Sifuna has before running for office is money, as their way of testing whether the young man was loaded to the point of running for such an office. The senior opinion shapers made it a habit of handing him petty bills to foot on their behalf, many of those bills ranging between 20,000 and 30,000 shillings per expense. Finally, when the ODM nominations were done in Kandui constituency, Sifuna's main competitor, a man known as John Makali, would beat Sifuna in the contest and get the ODM ticket for that area.
So I didn't get the party ticket in the primaries. Tulifanywa maneno. And my friend of Ulabuke, one day we will sit down and drink tea with him.
Yes.
Ask him about
the party. On this, he has been here 3 times.
The party primaries in Kandui.
Yes.
It was quite an experience for me. But I didn't give up. I came back after not getting the ticket for the party. I was running my law firm here in Nairobi.
On failing to get the ODM ticket for Kandui, Edwin Sifuna went back to Nairobi before the 2017 elections had happened, especially because as consolation for losing the Kandui ticket, ODM leadership like his think tank colleague Professor Nyong'o were offering him the senatorial ticket for Nairobi City in that election. Sifuna was still in the village licking his wounds when the phone call came through from Nairobi asking him to travel immediately for an emergency meeting. On arrival, Sifuna found himself in a room with Winnie Odinga, Raila's last-born daughter, together with dynastic Kikuyu businessperson Jimmy Wanjiru, who was a long-time political financier for the ODM party.
Hiyo siku, unajua mtu alikuwa amekaa kwa kiti kama wewe hapo. Jimmy Wanjiru, anajua.
No.
I'm telling you, akaniambia pesa. That's why I'm here, Sifuna.
Party Executive Director Oduor Ongwen and Professor Adam Zolo, all top decision makers in the party even back then. In that meeting, Winnie would assure Sifuna that the ODM ticket for the Nairobi senatorial race was going to be a direct ticket to him, and Jimmy Wanjiru himself promised to fund his entire senatorial campaign. Professor Adam Zolo and Dr. Ongwen, on their part, promised to help Sifuna draw up his campaign strategy and even give him attractive messaging for his campaign manifesto. Jimmy Wanjiru went even further to demonstrate how serious he was by asking Sifuna to get his team and calculate the cost of funding his entire campaign budget, which he did, and the total estimated cost came to 54 million Kenyan shillings. Later on, Sifuna says that he would go to Wanjiru's office at ABC Place to collect the money that Wanjiru had pledged to him, only for him to find that the tycoon was no longer willing to contribute the 54 million he had said he would, but instead, he gave Sifuna some 100,000 shillings, which Sifuna says only covered the cost of fuel for his vehicle on the campaign motorcade. Even though Raila Odinga and the party leadership had wanted for Edwin Sifuna to get the ODM ticket for Nairobi Senator in 2017, the man who actually won in the party primaries was Bukachi Chapia. Therefore, Winnie Odinga too could not deliver the promise she had made to Edwin Sifuna about getting him the ticket directly without a contest. Winnie tried all she could, and a crisis meeting was convened to settle the matter, chaired by party leader himself, Raila Odinga. Bukachi Chapia, the man who had won the ticket, would however refuse to leave it to Sifuna, insisting that his win was justified and he had invested in it. The issue would be escalated to the courts of law, and the case was only decided 6 weeks to the general elections, with Bukachi Chapia winning the case against Edwin Sifuna. In the ballot in 2017, Johnson Arthur Sakaja of the ruling Jubilee Party beat the ODM candidate to become the new senator.
Sifuna was not, I looked for Sifuna in all hotels in Addis. I did not see him.
What did you want to do to be in the hotel?
Edwin Sifuna would take a temporary backseat in 2017 elections, scheming and plotting on how to make his next big move in politics. Outside ODM politics, Edwin Sifuna had also been making major professional moves in the Nairobi legal community, having managed to be elected into the smallest council of the LSK in 2016. As a Law Society insider, Sifuna was among the lawyers who formed the notorious breakaway group known as the Okoa LSK movement, which was a rebel group pushing for radical changes in how the lawyers' organization was doing its business. The dramatic scene we witnessed at the beginning of this video took place in the year 2016, where Edwin Sifuna had invited reporters and their cameras to the ODM party headquarters in Nairobi and announced to the whole nation that a takeover was underway and that he had now taken over Namwamba's office as the new ODM Secretary General. Ababu Namwamba would be evicted from ODM never to return, later ending up with future President William Ruto, another former senior official of the ODM party.
And it boils down to running an outfit where you're not consulting, where you're not involving people.
Okay,
yes.
okay. So a statement from Advocate Edwin Sifuna says that you are an absentee leader in ODM, and I quote, "At critical moments you failed to rally the party, failed to participate in the pro-referendum drives, and you have currently stayed off the anti-IEBC drives." He recently took over your office, and I think he's on the phone now. Let's speak to him. Edwin Sifuna?
Hi, Yvonne.
Hi, we have the ODM Secretary General Ababu Namwamba, as I'm sure you know by now. Would you like to make a statement to him?
Yeah. You have the ceremonial Secretary General. It's good that you have given the substantive Secretary General an opportunity to also speak on this matter. It is quite interesting that...
In a later interview with the Star newspaper, Sifuna went on to explain the reasons he had taken over as party SG in the manner that he did back then. He would reveal that at the time, the ODM top leadership had caught wind of how Ababu Namwamba, their sworn Secretary General, was already having secret night meetings with Raila Odinga's political competitors in the oncoming 2017 elections. Many members and officials in ODM could not dare confront Ababu Namwamba about the allegations of being a mole for the Deputy President William Ruto back then, or accept Edwin Sifuna. Sifuna's fearless move to publicly criticize the party Secretary General in 2016 would paint him in a new and positive light to the many ODM party supporters countrywide who had previously not known him.
Now, Ilamba najiuliza, why is Ababu here? My answer to you is this: only a fool never changes his mind.
Despite his dramatic declaration in June 2016 saying he had made himself Secretary General, the position would remain vacant for 2 more years after Ababu's ouster, with Agnes Zani acting in an interim capacity until when Sifuna was confirmed as the official Secretary General to the party much later in 2018. Edwin Sifuna was away on party business when he got a call telling him that he had been appointed as the new party SG for ODM on the 23rd of February 2018, just a month before his party leader Raila Odinga did the famous Harambee House handshake with President Uhuru Kenyatta. Without Sifuna's knowledge, a meeting of the ODM National Executive Council had been held that Thursday morning in Nairobi, chaired by Baba himself. In the meeting that would go on for several hours, Edwin Sifuna and then CEO of the defunct National Super Alliance NASA, Mr. Norman Magaya, were the 2 men being considered for the new ODM SG, in which they settled on Edwin Sifuna.
Many people in the party had never seen me as a politician. They used to know there's this lawyer in the party who just gives legal advice. But when they see that you can actually speak to masses, you can move the people. When now, after the election in 2018, they are sitting and saying Agnes Zani was acting as G there. So there was a meeting of the National Governing Council. They're looking for an SG. And I think my name and Norman Magaya's name had been proposed. So I was in Mombasa. We were doing Joe's case. It was a day for judgment of Joe's election petition. Then they called me, like, Sifuna, the party thinks we should give you SG. If we give you the job, will you do it? I was like, yeah, I'll do it.
As the new Secretary General in 2018, Edwin Sifuna acquired more authority and influence within the party's sphere of influence, becoming the #1 defender of the former Prime Minister outside the National Assembly. Under SG Edwin Sifuna, the ODM party discipline standards for its elected members went up, and he would end up punishing and sometimes even expelling members who did not toe the party line. The very first member of the ODM to clash with new SG Sifuna was Aisha Jumwa, an elected member for Malindi constituency.
Sheria ya chama cha ODM mwenye kutunga sio Sifuna. Mheshimiwa SG, kwa heshima zote, mahali ulipofikia hautaweza kuendelea. Kwa heshima zote. Kwa heshima zote, mahali ulipofikia, hatuko hapa kusikia masuala ya chama cha ODM, tuko hapa kwa mazishi kumfariji Kingi. Hatuwezi heshimu wa Mijikenda.
After the drama was over, reporters would ask Sifuna why he did not react to his speech being cut short by Ms. Jumwa. His answer was that he was a chivalrous lawyer man who did not want to fight a lady. By the year 2019, it was becoming clear that Edwin Sifuna was targeting not just to be elected to parliament, but he also saw himself as a future leader of his lawyer community.
The worst speaker in this parliament, because he is running the house as if he is a DJ at Disco Matanga there in Matisi.
He began by criticizing Musalia Mudavadi, who was considered the overall leader of the Mulembe people that year. In September 2019, Edwin Sifuna had been quoted telling reporters that the ODM had no time to discuss supporting Mudavadi for the presidency in 2022 general elections, which were just around the corner back then.
It doesn't matter how much time you give Ojienda and Aladwa, they will never persuade me that that Ruto is good for the country. In fact, time is up. There is very little that Ruto can do in the intervening period to save his presidency, and he knows it. That is why his allies are speaking the way that he does. That is why he is insulting the public and telling them off every turn he gets. He told us that he has a PhD and nobody should lecture him on anything. I've never seen a PhD who hangs out with class 2 dropouts, because what you do then is that you reduce the average intelligence to at least class 8. If you are just surrounded by, they say birds of a feather flock together.
Sifuna would even call out Mudavadi for being a rudderless leader of the Luhya, comments that would trigger backlash from Mudavadi's support base. In the 2022 general elections, Edwin Sifuna would be elected as Nairobi Senator, going to Parliament for the first time in his eventful political career.
I want to say, any person can build a road, anybody can build a house. Dictators build roads, dictators build houses. It takes a true patriot with values to build a nation.
He had been elected with a record 716,876 votes. In February 2023, Senator Edwin Sifuna became the Deputy Minority Whip of the Senate, and he would go on to become one of the most eloquent and respected voices in that Senate Assembly. In the opposition-led protests to push for lower cost of living, Senator Edwin Sifuna would lead the youth faction of the ODM party to the streets in 2023, carrying a signature sufuria, a cooking pot, as a symbol of the rising prices of essential commodities in the country.
There is really nothing that William Ruto seems to be getting right. Not internal issues, not external issues.
In the months that followed, Senator Sifuna would remain the biggest critic of the President William Ruto's government inside ODM, and even after Raila Odinga joined Ruto's government in 2024, after the extraordinary events of the June 26 youth uprising, Sifuna would remain the only contradictory voice in the party that wanted ODM to have its own presidential candidate to challenge Ruto in 2027, instead of Raila Odinga leading the party into government to support William Ruto for re-election.
Someone like Sifuna will not remain in ODM because already it's conflicted.
Throughout the period of Raila's cooperation with William Ruto between 2024 and 2025, Edwin Sifuna, the ODM SG, remained a thorn in the flesh of President William Ruto, especially since Ruto had desperately wanted Raila Odinga to endorse him openly for 2027. Unfortunately for both Edwin Sifuna and President Ruto, Raila Odinga died in India in October 2025, leaving the succession politics of his ODM party in total chaos.
First of all, my head was just buzzing, and people ask me, one day I will tell you the story, that the overwhelming emotion for me was actually anger.
Why were you angry?
I was so angry. I was angry at so many things.
In the weeks and months following Raila Odinga's death, Senator Edwin Sifuna would intensify his political opposition to President William Ruto, even as Raila's elder brother inherited the party leadership and removed Sifuna from ODM leadership with the influence of Ruto. Edwin Sifuna's popularity among the youth of Kenya exploded almost overnight following Raila's death, especially due to his removal from the party for refusing to endorse President William Ruto's re-election. By June 2026, 1 year to the 2027 presidential elections, Edwin Sifuna had become one of the most attractive political candidates to work with among leaders of the opposition.
Huku munaniona vizuri, hapa katikati munaniona vizuri, huku munaniona vizuri, mimi ndio Sifuna.
When he said, mimi ndio Sifuna, they've said, sisi ndio Sifuna. And sort of it brings in this whole new wave and expectation. Do you feel the weight of this moment?
Actually, I have been amazed by the outpouring of support from Kenyans of all walks of life.
And many among the country's youth demographic seemed to believe he would make a good president at 44 years old. In the 1 year following Raila Odinga's death, Edwin Sifuna and the other ODM maverick Babu Owino would form their own rebel outfit outside the Raburu-led ODM, calling it Linda Mwananchi Group. With their political meetings attracting thousands of Generation Z youth from across the country, Sifuna and Babu have been accused of receiving money from the wealthy retired President Uhuru Kenyatta to facilitate their opposition to Ruto and their campaigns towards the 2027 presidential elections. An opinion poll conducted in May 2026 would place both Sifuna and Babu Owino among the most preferred politicians for the next president of Kenya.